Our inability to find jobs in Montreal in order to earn money to work our way to Europe as we had planned triggered the first crisis on our trip. One of the guys, who had only come along for the adventure, decided to quit and hitchhike home. The other two, my fellow bon vivants, Jeff and Bob, decided to stop looking for jobs on a ship and instead use their limited funds to purchase passage on a freighter heading for England. I was upset with this decision, especially since they had obviously discussed and decided upon it separate from me. We argued, and I tried to talk them out of it. I told them quitting is a habit. If they quit now, they would always quit each time they met resistance and disappointment. They would establish a pattern for failure rather than one for success. It was a matter of principle that we not give up at the first sign of resistance to our plans. Parting of the ways. But their minds were made up. They were impatient to get to Europe and not interested in finding another way. We went to the bank, withdrew all the money we had so carefully accumulated over the previous year, and split it 3 ways. They used half their money to book passage on a freighter that took a small number of paying passengers. They left the next day. Our partnership was officially dissolved just 2 weeks after starting out. I later learned that partnerships are the worst of all forms of business relationships. They start off with high hopes and usually end with dashed expectations, ruined friendships, and mutual recriminations. One of the partners is always more dedicated and harder working, while the others contribute less and less and yet demand an equal share of the profits. Re-evaluating the situation. I decided it was too late in the year to go to Africa and resolved to stay in Montreal for the winter. I got a job as a construction laborer in an office high-rise where I carried materials for the carpenters and joiners all day. I later worked in a factory on a production line, screwing nuts onto bolts hour after hour. Because of my limited means and savings, I rented a tiny one-room apartment with a fold-out bed and a small kitchen. The temperature that winter fell to 35 degrees below zero, and life seemed very bleak indeed. Here I was, 20 years old, 3,200 miles from my family, with no intention of going back home. I had failed in high school, fooling around and working as a dishwasher in a small hotel rather than studying. I was uneducated, unskilled, and regularly unemployed, and I wanted to go to Africa. This was not a great start at life. My great revelation. I still remember that fateful night sitting alone at my little kitchen table with the cold winter wind howling outside. It suddenly dawned on me that everything and anything I ever accomplished in life was up to me. I was completely responsible. No one was ever going to do anything for me. If I did not take charge of my life and make changes, nothing was ever going to change. I would remain an underpaid laborer, pinching pennies and worrying about money for the rest of my life. It was an incredible revelation. I determined right then and there that my future would be different from my past. I wrote out a series of goals for myself and resolved to take action on them. That realization that night was the turning point in my life. The next day, I bought a book and began to study French to prepare for my travels in France and Africa. I started taking karate lessons 3 times per week. I read every book I could get on subjects that interested me. I began my lifelong commitment to personal development and success. I was responsible. Back on the road again. 5 months later, at the end of February, I packed all my belongings in an old trunk and shipped them to Halifax, the biggest port on the Atlantic coast. I then spent several chilly days on the road hitchhiking my way across the maritime provinces to Halifax and once more checked into the local YMCA. My goal was to get a job on a ship, work my way to England, rejoin my friends, and set off once more for Africa. I got up early that cold winter morning and began scouring the waterfront, visiting every ship from one end of the harbor to the other and asking if they needed a crewman for the crossing to England. By the end of the day, after hours of plodding from dock to dock, I had gone to each ship on the waterfront and been turned down every time. There was not a single ship going to England that needed anyone for the voyage. Tired and dejected, I trudged up the long hill back to the warmth of the YMCA, wondering what I would do next.